What do the Egyptian pyramids, the Great Wall of China, and any medieval castle have in common? They were all built by hand, by the power of human muscles. But there is one difference. Castles were more complex. A pyramid is essentially an ideal, symmetrical mountain of stone. A castle is a complex, asymmetrical structure, with a well-thought-out system of internal rooms, a network of corridors and a powerful defensive perimeter, built not on a flat area, but on the most inconvenient and dangerous points on the map. Forget everything you know about modern construction. We are going to a world where there were no engines, no blueprints, no safety precautions. A world where everything depended on the genius of one man, and the price for every stone was incredible labor and years of life. This is not just a story about construction. This is a saga about how the human will defeated the laws of physics. It all begins not with stone, but with desperation and ambition. Imagine a world where power is as ephemeral as the morning mist. A world without laws, where neighbor comes against neighbor with fire and sword. A powerful baron looks out of the window of his wooden fort and sees not wealth but vulnerability. He is haunted by the fear of lawlessness. He knows that any enemy could destroy his lands and end his reign. To survive, to leave a mark on history, he needs something more than wood and earth. He needs an anchor. A fortress that will grip the rock and nail his power to the very heart of this world. He needs a castle, but such things are not built. They are called into being. And for this great deed a priest is needed. A man whose name is a legend. A great master. He comes not as a craftsman, but as a sage. His hands are rough from working with stone, but his eyes see not what is, but what can be. He does not carry blueprints. He carries secrets, sacred knowledge of geometry, passed down from generation to generation, the secrets of balance and strength that allow man to rival the mountains. Together, the baron and the master, they climb to the top of the hill. The wind sings its song here, carrying the scent of wild grass and damp earth. The baron sees only rocks and trees. But the master builder, he reads this landscape like a book. His gaze slides along the lines of the hills, assessing vulnerable approaches. He listens to the earth, feeling the solidity of the rocky foundation under his feet. He looks at the bend of the river below and already sees in it a moat created by nature itself. He is not looking for just a place. He is looking for a point of strength, where the earth itself will help him protect the castle. And then, he finds it. He stops. Silence. It seems as if the wind itself holds its breath in anticipation. The master builder closes his eyes, and behind his eyelids, in the absolute silence of his mind, the castle builds itself. He sees every tower, every passage, every embrasure. Then he opens his eyes. He says not a word. He simply bends down, picks up a sharp stone from the ground, and begins to draw directly in the turf. Lines, circles, squares. This is more than a plan. It is a prophecy carved into the earth. The outlines of the future giant, which here and now take on their first, ghostly form. Every line is a promise of security. Every circle is the outline of a tower that will look upon the world for hundreds of years. The baron looks at these simple scratches on the ground and sees the future of his lineage. He sees an indestructible fortress. The plan is drawn. The vision has taken shape. But this is only the first whisper in the history of the stone giant. Now this vision will have to be paid for. And the price will not be measured in gold, but in decades of hard work and the efforts of thousands of people. The hardest part is just beginning. The plan was written in the ground. But for the master builder's vision to come to life, it would require more than just an idea. It would require power. The raw, primordial power of thousands of human hands. The second act of creation would begin, the gathering of workers who would cause the sleeping stone giant to awaken. As if by an invisible signal, people begin to flock to the hill. From every village in the barony and from beyond its borders, streams of people arrive. Some come to fulfill their vassal duty, some in search of work and food, and some simply because a new era is being born here. And at the foot of the hill, where fate is predestined, a temporary city grows out of mud, wood, and chaos. This is not just a camp. It is a huge, buzzing anthill, living by its own laws. The air here is thick and heavy. It is saturated with acrid smoke from coal pits, the tart smell of freshly cut oak, the smell of hard work and the shrill screech of saws cutting through wood. Day and night there is a deafening cacophony, thousands of voices merging into a single hum, the rhythmic knocking of hundreds of hammers, the roar of blacksmith bellows and the incessant, cicada-like sound of chisels gnawing into stone. There is an iron order in this city. At the top is the master builder. He is the undisputed king of this temporary kingdom. His word is law, his look is an order. He is the conductor of this chaotic orchestra, and only he hears the final symphony in his head. Below him is the aristocracy, the keepers of secret knowledge. The stonemasons, the priests of stone. They speak their own special language of symbols and gestures, incomprehensible to outsiders. They are divided into rough masons, who shape the basic blocks, and freemasons, artists who carve lace-like arches and chimeras from malleable limestone. Interesting fact, every master stonemason had his own personal mark, or banker mark. He carved this unique symbol on every stone he worked. It was not just a signature, but an invoice. At the end of the week, the steward would count the marks and issue payment. These marks can still be found on the walls of ancient castles, ghostly autographs of long-forgotten geniuses. Next to them are the carpenters, the lords of the forest. They know the soul of every tree. They can look at a century-old oak and see not just a trunk, but a future massive beam for the keep ceiling, capable of withstanding the weight of a siege engine. Without them, there would be no scaffolding snaking up the walls, no roofs, no gates, no deadly cranes. And at the very heart of the camp beats its pulsating core, the forge. Blacksmiths are the pulse of construction. Their hammers set the rhythm of the entire city, forging from fire and iron the driving force of the project. Thousands of nails, millions of staples, chains for drawbridges and, most importantly, constantly renewing and sharpening the cutting edge of construction tools, the wedges and chisels of stonemasons. But all this is just the tip. The foundation of a giant. And the living force that creates it is a nameless, faceless mass of thousands of simple workers. Peasants, farm laborers, debtors, they are all here. They dig ditches with primitive wooden shovels. They mix tons of caustic lime mortar with their feet. They carry stones on their backs in wicker baskets until they are completely exhausted. This castle is built on a foundation of nameless stories and forgotten names. The army has assembled. Chaos has found structure. The city of dirt and noise lives and breathes. Now this vast machine requires fuel. It requires thousands of tons of stone and entire forests of wood to begin its slow, arduous climb to the heavens. The battle for materials begins. The army was assembled, and the temporary city buzzed at the foot of the hill like a giant beehive. But it was an army without weapons, a city without walls. The awakening stone giant was hungry. It demanded sustenance. It demanded a feast of tens of thousands of tons of stone, entire forests of timber, and rivers of lime mortar. The great hunt began, a brutal battle not against men, but against nature itself. The first target was a stone quarry, a gaping scar on the side of a neighboring mountain. The work here was closer to brutal confrontation than craftsmanship. To expose the rock base, workers resorted to the primitive and impressive technology of fire drilling. For weeks, they dragged entire trees to the rock, building a giant bonfire at its base. Then they set it alight. The flames roared for several days, their heat so intense that the stone began to glow from within. And when the rock was heated to its limit, hundreds of buckets of ice-cold water were poured onto it. There was a sound like thunder. Unable to withstand the thermal shock, the stone burst with a deafening crack, releasing huge, shapeless boulders. It was a crude method. But where precision was required, stonecutters came into play. They acted as architects, finding natural cracks in the rock, its structural lines. They drove rows of iron wedges into these cracks, striking them with rhythmic, coordinated blows. Then they inserted wedges of dry wood between the iron and poured water over them. Slowly but surely, the swelling wood, like a living creature, tore the stone apart from within with a quiet groan. Each block freed from the mountain was a victory. These rough blocks, weighing several tons, were then placed on wooden sleds and dozens of oxen strained to pull them along primitive log roads to the foot of the castle, leaving deep scars in the ground. Simultaneously with the conquest of stone, there was an invasion of another ancient realm, the forest. Carpenters did not simply cut down trees, they conducted a selective, thoughtful hunt. At their head was the forest architect, a man who understood the language of trees. He could walk through the forest and see not just trunks, but future elements of the castle. This straight, arrow-like, 100-year-old oak would become the central beam in the Lord's Hall. And that one, with its curved trunk, would be perfect for the arch above the gate. The crack of falling giants echoed throughout the valley. But cutting down a tree was only half the battle. To transport a single massive log from the heart of the forest to the construction site, it took the coordinated efforts of dozens of people and animals, the laying of temporary roads, and a system of levers and blocks that had remained unchanged since the days of ancient Rome. An entire forest, which had stood silently here for centuries, was transformed in a few years into the frame and floors of the future castle, but both stone and wood were merely cold foundations. To breathe life into them required a special art. And this art was born in the hottest place on the entire construction site, in the lime kiln. This red-hot furnace, made of clay and stone, was the alchemical heart of the project. Workers, their faces blackened by soot and their hands roughened by the heat, fed it with wood and limestone around the clock. Inside, at temperatures exceeding 900 degrees, the stone underwent a relentless transformation over several days, turning into caustic, unstable quicklime. Then the key stage began, quenching. Water was added to the vats containing this red-hot substance. The reaction was instantaneous and violent, the water turned into columns of steam, and the mixture hissed and bubbled like a boiling cauldron. It was at this point that secret ingredients were added to the mortar. Clever craftsmen added horsehair or straw to the mixture, which acted as primitive reinforcement, preventing the mortar from cracking. They created medieval fiber-reinforced concrete. This strange, smoking composition was the living soul of the castle. The only force capable of transforming a chaotic pile of stones into an indestructible monolith. The foundation and strength were ready. A mountain of stones, a forest of logs, and a river of mortar waited for their moment at the foot of the hill. The great preparation was complete. Now began the most spectacular act of creation, the erection. The stone giant was ready to rise from the ground. At the foot of the hill lay mountains of conquered stone and forests. The army of builders was ready. The most spectacular and longest act of creation was beginning, the hour of embodiment. Now, from the scars left in the ground, the stone giant would begin its slow, inexorable ascent to the sky. The first step is not upward, but downward. Construction begins with digging a trench and a foundation, a process that is like trying to move the world by hand. Hundreds of workers, armed only with wooden shovels with iron tips, dig into the earth. They work in the scorching sun and pouring rain, carrying tons of clay and rocks in wicker baskets on their backs. It is monotonous work. A trench is not just a hole. It is the first line of defense, a scar on the face of the earth that screams, no further. Simultaneously, the foundation is laid. Workers dig trenches until their shovels strike the hard, mother bedrock. They must nail the future giant to the very heart of the world, so that no siege engine, no earthquake can shake it. At the bottom of the trench, the largest and roughest boulders are laid, creating a platform on which the entire colossal mass of the castle will rest. When the foundation is ready, the true magic begins. The walls start to grow. But this is not simple masonry. It is an ingenious, stone sandwich technology. Imagine, two master stonemasons, working with surgical precision, lay the outer and inner skin of the wall with perfectly fitted blocks. They use only a primitive plumb line, a weight on a string, to achieve perfect verticality. And the space between these two layers, the core of the wall, turns into a seething cauldron. Workers pour in tons of rubble, cobblestones, broken stone, whatever is at hand, and generously pour hot, steaming lime mortar over it all. The mixture hardens, turning the wall into a single, indestructible monolith. On the outside is perfect masonry, on the inside is a disordered core of stone and lime. The wall grows slowly, layer by layer, acquiring its stone cladding and becoming thicker and higher. But how do you get a block the weight of an ox to the top of this growing wall? Here comes the main hero of the construction site, its wooden king, the crane with a running wheel. This creaky, cumbersome structure is the pinnacle of medieval engineering. Its operation is a ritual. The foreman shouts orders. The workers fasten a block of stone into iron pincers. Then two men climb inside the giant squirrel wheel. They begin to walk. Slowly, rhythmically, as if walking into nowhere. The wheel begins to turn with a groan, winding up the rope. There is a deafening creak of wood, and then, swaying in the wind, the stone block lifts off the ground and slowly creeps toward the sky. The entire camp freezes, watching this terrifying spectacular. One false step, one snapped rope, and tons of stone will come crashing down. But time after time, the wooden beast does its job, feeding the growing giant with stone. Gradually, the castle acquires its unique features. The corners of its walls are rounded, turning into towers. And this is not a whim, but a brilliant calculation. The round tower has no blind spots for archers and reflects the blows of stones from catapults much more effectively, forcing them to slide tangentially. In the very center rises the dungeon, the stone heart of the castle. This is its last stand, its citadel within its citadel. Its walls are even thicker, its entrance is high above the ground, so that it can only be reached by a wooden ladder that can be thrown down. This is the place where the defenders will fight to their last breath. And finally, the master builder's most insidious creation is erected, the gate tower. This is not an entrance. It is a stone trap, created to stop any enemy. An attacker who breaks through the first line finds himself in a corridor as narrow as a crack. In front of him is the second, inner grate. And the first, outer one, falls with a crash behind him, locking him in a stone bag. From above, through the hidden loopholes in the ceiling, a squall falls on the heads of the enemies, streams of viscous resin pour, hot sand rains down, and heavy stones fly. To pass through such a corridor is the same as voluntarily entering the mouth of a dragon. Decades passed like the changing of the seasons. The dust of the construction site settled, the roar of chaos gave way to meaningful work. The stone giant, created at the cost of incredible effort, was already firmly on its feet, its mighty frame towering over the valley. But it was still only a body without a soul, silent and empty. The last, most delicate act of creation had begun, the transformation of the military machine into a living world. Now it is not the stone tamers who come to the castle, but the artists and craftsmen. The rumble of hammers gives way to the melodic clatter of chisels and the creaking of planes. The carpenters who once erected gigantic scaffolding now, like sculptors, create the inner world of the castle. They lay wide oak planks in the great hall, which will creak under the feet of hundreds of generations. They erect massive rafters, reminiscent of the vaults of a cave, under which lords and knights will feast. Then came the plasterers. And here the main myth of the dark Middle Ages collapses. The walls inside the castle were not left bare and grey. They were covered with layers of white lime plaster, which caught and reflected the precious light from the narrow windows, making the dark rooms brighter. And in the Lord's chambers and chapel, on this white base, court artists painted bright frescoes, scenes of great battles, hunts for mythical beasts or the faces of saints. The inner world of the castle was a world of color. Blacksmiths no longer forge nails, but create art. From under their hammers come massive, creaking hinges for gates, twisted handles for doors, and heavy chandeliers on which hundreds of candles will burn, turning the hall into an island of light in the midst of the night's darkness. And in the chapel windows, glaziers install the greatest treasure, stained glass. Each uneven, cloudy piece, held together by lead, is worth a fortune and, letting in the sunlight, fills the room with a divine, colored radiance. And now the day comes. The day of silence. The master builder, now a deep, hunched old man with a face like a map of his own creations, walks around the castle for the last time. He walks through echoing corridors, running his hand over the cold, smooth stones. He remembers the name of the man who hewed this particular block. He remembers the day the scaffolding collapsed by that wall. For him, this is not just a building. It is an album of his life, full of shadows and triumphs. It is no longer just a fortress. It is a self-sufficient world, a stone ark in the middle of the raging sea of the Middle Ages. Its cellars store grain for a year of siege. Its deep well provides clean water when all the rivers are poisoned. Within its walls there is its own chapel, its own bakeries, its own workshops. It is a symbol of order and stability in a world of chaos. It is a stone heart that will beat for centuries. It was born of one man's ambition, another's genius, and the labors of thousands of nameless ones. And it will stand here, watching indifferently as its creators fade into oblivion, as kingdoms fade into the past, as eras change. So when you look at the ruins of an ancient castle today, don't just see a pile of stones. Listen. And maybe, through the noise of the wind, you'll hear a faint echo of that great symphony, the pounding of hammers, the creaking of cranes, and the voices of the people who were able to build eternity.